It died in the 70s, and the reason, I don't know if you know the reason for that, but the reason for that was because in the 70s there was this huge boom of skateboarding, right? Like it went from the 60s being like sidewalk surfing, and then the 70s, people were taking it from the sidewalks to like kind of like pools and bowls, like backyard bowls. So then they started making these skate parks, and skate parks in the 70s weren't like skate parks today. They were like a bunch of bowls and a bunch of like waves and stuff, right? Like a bunch of concrete, like bumps and stuff like that. Well, the reason why skateboarding died, at least from what I've heard, the reason why there was all these, I guess there was a ton of concrete parks, right? And the reason why they died was because there was only like 2 or 3 people who would in the nation who would insure these skate parks, and I guess or one company that would insure them. Well, that company went out of business or something like that, and so since these skate parks didn't have insurance, they all closed. And I heard that a lot of them they just buried. They just buried the skate park. So if you were to like dig up the earth, you might find an old skate park in there. But like there was tons of parks and they all closed. So that's when it went from the 70s into the 80s. And then the 80s is when like the wood ramps started coming around, like a wood U-pipe, which is when vert skating started. So like in the 70s was more about like bowl skating because there was backyard pools. Started on the sidewalks in the 60s. 70s was more about like bowls because like backyard pools. And then it went into the 80s, it went into like the wood vert ramp. And then people got sick of skating a wood vert ramp, so they kind of took it more to the streets because it's like, whoa, it's like the old concrete parks, but it's like unlimited, right? You can skate anything. So then it went from street, and in the 90s, the street got huge in the 90s. And then and I think do you remember Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the video game? The first one?
I never played it, but I had an older cousin who played it.
The first one, honestly, I can tell you, it created a spike for skateboarding. It created so much momentum for skateboarding. It was insane. Like when that game came out, like everything was skateboarding was on the rise. You know what I mean? And I think X Games came out maybe a couple years later around then. I'm not, maybe it even came out before then around the same time because it was Tony Hawk, and Tony Hawk was like the big X Games guy. So it might have been at the same time. But so you had X Games and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater made skateboarding take this like huge rise. But I think that X Games and all that is kind of the beginning of like major corporate skating. Like Nike didn't make skate shoes then. Nike started making skate shoes a couple years later, but that kind of introduced corporate to skateboarding too. Like there was corporate before that, but it introduced like hardcore corporate, and that's why you've seen a rise of a lot of independent brands now too. Is like skateboarders broke off from these corporate companies because they really wanted to have something that was like had core value, and they wanted something that like a skateboarder owned and operated company that pays skateboarders to ride. You know what I mean? Rather than like a corporate company who doesn't care about everyone, they just care about like how much money can you make us, you know? Oh, you suck at skating now? Later we'll get the new best guy, you know? So it has died a couple times. There was even a front of like I think Thrasher magazine in like 1990 or 91, and it said "Vert is dead."